Hello and welcome to my presentation on public health interventions for the unit Epidemiology and Principles. The Australian Institute of Health and Welfare estimated that 13,280 people would be diagnosed with skin cancer in 2016. 2 in 3 Australian adults will at some stage be diagnosed with a form of skin cancer in their lifetime. And it was also estimated in 2016 that for every dollar invested in skin cancer education, $3.85 is returned. This is in the form of productivity that is not lost by businesses and less money being allocated to hospitals and other health services to perform treatments such as chemotherapy. Despite this, skin cancer diagnosis rates remain high, with diagnosis rates expected to increase this year. Skin cancer can affect everyone, but there are several factors that increase the risk of developing skin cancer. These include the time one spends unprotected in the sun, tanning in the sun or using solariums. Certain skin types can increase the risk of skin cancer. The Fitzpatrick scale, which is seen here, indicates the risk each skin type has. However, it should be noted that no skin type is a safeguard from developing skin cancer, and each person should be as vigilant as possible. Family history can play a role in the risk of developing skin cancer. However, it is generally the individual's own history and prior behaviour that impacts this risk. Age also plays a role in skin cancer, with the 60 to 69 age group representing the highest new case rate of any age group in Australia. This could potentially be due to a longer life of sun exposure and potentially poor use of sun-smart habits such as a lack of sunscreen use and tanning. According to the Cancer Council, the average age for someone to be diagnosed with melanoma is 33 years of age. However, this does not mean that the risk of skin cancer is less at a younger age, and it is important for sun-smart habits to be formed from a young age. The Australian Institute of Health and Welfare report that per year, more males are diagnosed with skin cancer than females. The incidence rate for skin cancer in Australia has remained steady at 50 cases per 100,000 people. The mortality rate has steadily increased and is now at 6.2 deaths per 100,000 people. This topic is important to me as I have several family members who have had experiences with skin cancer, and I am also at a high risk of developing skin cancer due to several factors. And as such, this topic holds a significant interest to me. The public health intervention related to skin cancer that I have chosen to look at is advertisements and media related to promoting sun safety, such as the ones you see on the slide. If used correctly, advertising can help change behaviours. However, if executed poorly, it can lead to misinformation and confusion from readers or viewers. I searched a number of EBSCO databases for my evidence. These were Medline and CINAHL. I also used the University of Canberra Library search engine to find any other relevant reviews. I did search the Cochrane Library, however I was unable to find any relevant results. Ultimately, my search used several key terms. These were skin cancer, melanoma, interventions, advertising, media, prevention, and appearance-based. These search terms were used interchangeably to ensure that all relevant articles were found. The inclusion criteria for this search was that the paper must be a systematic review or meta-analysis. The studies must be in English and have more than 1,000 total participants, except in the case of one qualitative study which looked at images and their content rather than participants, and in that case it exceeded more than 3,000 images. Articles were excluded if they did not include print media alongside other interventions such as television advertisements. I also tried to only include reviews that looked at studies from Australia and the United States. However, one review used studies from the United Kingdom. I found that it was necessary to exclude those media campaigns that were angled at a particular subset, such as tourist and recreational populations, and to only include reviews that looked at the wider population as in general, as tourists and those who participate in recreational activities are not the only populations at risk of skin cancer. The number of relevant papers that were found using the keywords and search criteria were 4 systematic reviews published between 2010 and 2016. Each of the reviews that I utilised all had a similar search criteria, that is, using multiple reputable databases such as Medline, CINAHL, and PsycInfo. Each review also used similar inclusion and exclusion criterion, which in turn led to a similar number of studies reviewed in each paper and a similar conclusion from each review. I yielded the most results from CINAHL, where 3 of the 4 systematic reviews could be found. There are a number of study designs that appeared in each systematic review. One review looked at quality of studies only. The study designs that featured in this review were focus groups and content analysis. A focus group holds a high amount of relevance to the topic, as it is a direct way of gauging the success of advertisements by asking those that have seen or not seen them, though this may not be successful when determining behaviour change. Content analysis applies a code to aspects of the media. In this instance, the code was applied to the image itself and aspects of it, such as the age, gender, tan level of the model, as well as if they were inside or outside, were using a hat or in the shade. This is relevant to the intervention, as it is a method that is able to compare images in a quantifiable way. However, there may be an issue if the author is determining their own criteria rather than sticking to one that has been determined prior. The other 3 reviews contain papers that used a number of quantitative study designs. These included randomized control trials, which hold a significant relevance to the topic, as it could determine if the intervention made an impact on participants' behaviour if they were part of the intervention group as opposed to the non-intervention group or control. Other study designs included before and after studies, which again can compare sun protective behaviour before and after seeing the intervention, so seeing the print media. Of these study designs, there were a mixture of experimental and quasi-experimental, as the researcher always had control of what the participant was exposed to within the research. However, not all of the study designs used randomization where exposure to the intervention was concerned. While these studies had sufficient sizes, some inferred that these advertisements, especially print media, are more likely to target females, and as such, it was not representative of the whole population at risk. Of the systematic reviews that looked at print media, few looked at men's magazines and did not provide reasons as to why this had occurred or if there simply wasn't any to analyse. Though it was reported by several of the reviews that females are subject to more advertising when it comes to skin cancer advertising. However, they are more likely to forgo preventative measures, which may account for the lack of advertising material in media directed towards males. As skin cancer affects both genders, the samples are not necessarily representative of the population at risk. Further analysis of the success of media advertisements towards promoting sun-smart behaviours should include analysis of if and where men are being targeted, and if this is negative, then further studies should be conducted to find out why. Many of the reviews reported a skew in data towards those of Caucasian ethnicity, which is also not representative of the population at risk of developing skin cancer. While those who are Caucasian may be more at risk of developing melanomas, they are not the only group, which leads to these studies not being completely representative of the population at risk. This was mentioned as a limitation by several of the reviews. Another limitation that was mentioned was how most of the images were targeted towards a younger population, such as those at university. This is not representative of the population at risk either. As mentioned earlier, those in the 60 to 69 age range in Australia have the highest new case rate. The evidence levels of these studies can be considered satisfactory to high quality evidence. Relevant studies were used with relevant study designs such as randomized controlled trials, which are the gold standard in study design. However, with the data not including all populations at risk, this may undermine the quality of each review and its findings, as it is not representative of the entire population. Several of the reviews mention a concern of bias, though each take a different approach to ameliorate it. For instance, one particular review used a mathematical equation known as fail-safe n. Failsafe N is not recommended for use by the Cochrane Handbook as it goes against several medical research principles as it allows authors to determine limits. So while the authors of this particular article have attempted to stop any potential bias, they may not have used the most reliable method. The study that used qualitative study designs noted that the way images were selected for assessment in each study may have introduced bias, as well as how images were not assessed using the same coding system in each individual study. The review, assessing the efficacy of appearance-focused interventions to prevent skin cancer, attempted to reduce bias by conducting a quality assessment of each paper, which included 13 aspects. This was based on Quest criteria derived by Bellamy, who also looked at similar sun protection interventions in 2005. And this allocates points to each criterion, such as study design, where randomized controlled trials scored the highest, and how behaviours were measured. The review that looked at community interventions expressed that there may be limitations due to the lack of community-based interventions, which may not identify unexposed populations. The conclusion of each review was that the media interventions to prevent skin cancer may change behaviour in a positive way. However, further research must be conducted to ensure that all populations at risk are targeted. Thank you.